Professional triathlon when I was 15. So I could swim. I came out of the water with the front group, which was all the greats. You had Dave Scott there, you had Mark Allen, you had Mike Pigg, you had the greats of the sport of triathlon professionally. And I came out of the water with them, came off the bike with them, and then faded a bit in the run. But that's the one that nobody knew who I was. They said, who's this kid?
How did you learn about cancer?
So I did the Olympic Games in Atlanta, so 1996. So it was about a month after the Games in Atlanta. I didn't know the difference. I was, oh my God, I have cancer. I obviously knew I had testicular cancer. I was calling friends. I was, hey, I heard I know your aunt had cancer. Well, she had breast cancer. I'm like, I don't care. I mean, she had cancer. Same thing, right? Well, obviously it's not, right?
To stay at the top, it's extremely difficult. Like, you didn't do it once, you did it 7 consecutive times.
I didn't love winning as much as I hated the thought of losing. What I truly loved, I loved the process.
We spoke about the Chris Sacca story once. You invested very early on in Uber. Can you tell us the story?
I didn't ask a lot of questions. I was betting on the man. And if it was Christine Sacca, I would have been betting on the woman.
Let's do a Q&A.
You mentioned betting on the man. What are some character traits that you index on most heavily that people might not expect, or things that flag to you that there's a reason not to bet on somebody?
I feel like I'm still in Austin with this heat. What?
So let me give a brief introduction about Lance. He started cycling at the age of 15, I believe. He ended up in the Olympics very, very early on. So he went to peak form and popularity, and then immediately he got cancer, which left him out for a period of time. Then he came back, created the Livestrong Foundation, which was against cancer, and he raised, I believe, $500 million. And then he came back and won 7 Tour de France, which is probably the most grueling event in the world amongst all sports. 7 times, not one, 7 times. And then he fell from grace and went from hero to zero.
Those are my words. We talked yesterday, and you just stole that from me.
Then
we're only telling true stories today, so that's right.
And then came back and invested in Uber and Docusign. Became one of the best investors around the world, and also started one of the most successful podcasts out there. And most importantly, has a family of 5. So welcome, Lance.
Thank you.
So let's get to the origin story. How did you get into sports?
I grew up in basically, I was born in Dallas, but I basically grew up in Plano, Texas, which I don't know if anybody's. Do you like Plano?
Yeah. I grew up in Carrollton.
Oh. I grew up there. Yeah. I'm going to leave it. No, I always kind of bag on Plano. But it was great. My mom still lives there. She lives in Frisco, so I still visit North Texas a lot. But anyhow, so as a Texas kid, I tried all the traditional sports, football, baseball, basketball. Had absolutely no potential there. Anything side to side, anything fast twitch, it just wasn't happening. And that's really true for humanity, I think. I mean, a donkey is never going to win the Kentucky Derby. We all know that. And I wasn't put here to play those sports, despite the social pressure. So I went to my mom. I was raised by a single mom, and I said, "Look, I'm quitting. I'm quitting all these sports." And she said, by the way, she was 17 when she had me. So this conversation is probably taking place when my mother. I'm 12 at the time. She's 29. Yeah, I mean, I graduated high school. She was 34. So she said, okay, you can quit those sports. She said, but you have to pick one sport. You have to have a sport that you at least participate in. And so I had a couple friends on the swim team, and so I chose swimming. But I didn't know how to swim properly. I mean, I could get across the pool, but I couldn't swim the 4 strokes. I certainly couldn't put them together and swim an IM. And so they started me as a 12-year-old with the 6 or 7-year-olds. As the pool, all the way on the left, you had the little kids, and then all of my friends that I wanted to join on the swim team were all the way to the right. But I didn't quit. I loved it, despite being a little embarrassed. I just stuck with it, and then month after month, I just moved across the pool. And really, swimming was my first true love, and so that was my entree to endurance sports and to like serious sports with serious training. And if anybody grew up swimming, you know what it's like. 2-a-day workouts, first AM workouts at 5:30 before school, then you have the workouts after school. I mean, we were swimming 10, 12,000 yards a day. So, and then at the end of it all, when I was 15, I got third in the state of Texas in the 1,000 free. So I figured it out. But I also ran track and cross country in high school. And then eventually I wanted to do a triathlon, so I got a bike, and then the rest is history.
I heard that first triathlon event, everybody was surprised by your performance that very early on.
Well, actually the first triathlon I did was a kids triathlon. So I was racing with other 13, 14-year-olds. But I turned professional in triathlon when I was 15. So that was the one you're probably referencing so I could swim. I came out of the water with the front group, which was all the greats. You had Dave Scott there, you had Mark Allen, you had Mike Pigg, you had the greats of the sport of triathlon professionally. And I came out of the water with them, came off the bike with them, and then faded a bit in the run. But that's the one that nobody knew who I was. They said, who's this kid?
So it wasn't that your first sport was cycling. It wasn't the classic story that everybody says, I started 5 years old and so on. Yours was like the third, probably the third one if you consider triathlon that has the part of that. Now, can we speak about the cycling path? Because you went quite early in the Olympics as well. Can you just paint us the story about Barcelona and how did you manage to get into the Olympics, and then how was it there?
Well, I mean, my dream was to be an Olympic triathlete. But for those, if you follow triathlon, I mean, now we're talking about late 80s, early 90s. The sport of triathlon actually didn't become an Olympic sport till 2000 in Sydney. So I'm watching this unfold, and I'm like, they're not going to be an Olympic sport, which is odd because to me it's sort of one of the perfect Olympic sports. And so I said, I'm going to switch to cycling. I always wanted to be an Olympian, so I went. Really, in 1990 was my first full-time year as a cyclist, and then made the Olympic team in Barcelona, 92.
How is it to be in the Olympics?
It's funny. I've done it. So I've done one Olympic Games as an amateur, and in 1990, y'all will all remember, 1992 was when the dam sort of broke for professional athletes. We had the dream team. That was the only team that was professional was the basketball team. Everybody else was amateurs. And then after that, most sports had professionals. As an amateur, it was the highlight. I mean, it was the ultimate. As for the professionals, especially in our sport, I don't want to say it's an afterthought or a secondary goal, but the Tour de France reigns so supreme in cycling that if you gave all of those guys, the opportunity to pick between winning an Olympic medal or winning a couple of stages in the Tour de France, who knows? Everybody's a little different, but the Tour is still the granddaddy. Yeah. So it's less cool. Not cool. It's less. There was less of a rush as a professional.
And how did you learn about cancer? I believe it was a bit later than that.
Actually, so I did the Olympic Games in Atlanta, so 1996. So it was about a month after the Games in Atlanta when I was diagnosed.
What did you do? Like, what did you do when this happened?
I mean, probably similar to what a lot of... You have to keep in mind, this was 1996. So if any of us in this gathering got anything, it doesn't have to be cancer, it could be anything, we would immediately grab our phones, right? And we would have so much information at our fingertips, what we could either find on Google or who we would start reaching out to. It's all right there. 1996, you didn't have that. I had a basic cell phone. The internet was not anything that most people had access to. I mean, we were grabbing pamphlets in the doctor's office and going to bookstores and just trying to gather information. So obviously that has all changed. But we were scared and confused. I mean, just didn't know. I didn't know the difference. Oh my God, I have cancer. I've obviously knew I had testicular cancer. I was calling friends. I was, hey, I heard I know your aunt had cancer. Well, she had breast cancer. I'm like, I don't care. I mean, she had cancer. It's the same thing, right? Well, obviously it's not, right? So I still get those questions a lot, and I have to explain to people sort of the differences between all these different malignancies. But yes, it was a crash course in oncology.
And it was a very serious one as well, right? It wasn't only in the testes; it also went to the brain. So you had to go all through that.
Yeah, it was. This is basically everywhere. I mean, if a young man, the path that sort of advanced cancers in young men with testicular cancer, it just travels up the body. So I had 2 spots on the brain. I mean, that we can all know that doesn't go any farther than that. Yeah, it was. I waited a long time.
Now, at the time, you're also trying to make your comeback in cycling, but at the same time, all your sponsors left you because of cancer. Well,
cycling's a team sport, so they get the sponsors. It's more of it's structured a little bit like Formula One, where you would go race for a Williams or a Ferrari or a McLaren, and they have they go sell the sponsorships. For the athlete, the only thing you have to do is get on a team. So what I couldn't find was a team that would take me.
So how did you find a new team?
Well, there was one team that would, and that was the American team sponsored by the Postal Service, which was, I mean, honestly, was my last choice, or my last. If I had to pick one, that was at the end of the line. But you got to find a ride somewhere, and look, it was not a good team. We built a great team out of it, and it was my shot. So in the end, it worked out.
So can you paint a bit the picture of, first of all, why is Tour de France so difficult? And then second, what's the setup of the team? What does each team need so you can compete there?
Well, I mean, it's 3 weeks long. It's gotten shorter over the years, but it's in our generation, it was 2,500 miles. What was that, 4,000 kilometers? And now it's about 2,000. But look, it's 3 weeks with only 2 rest days. They don't take into consideration any of the elements, whether it's storms or heat. Obviously, truly cold temps are not not an issue in July, but the race goes on, and if you want to take another rest day, you don't get to do that. Like, you get to take rest days on the official rest day. So I think you'd be hard pressed to find another sporting event that's harder. I mean, three weeks is just a long time to do something.
Only the distance, I think it's New York to Vegas.
Well, I've never driven New York to Vegas, but I know it's around 2,000 miles. And of course, you have the mountains. Everybody knows the mountains are going to be hard. But there's so much time that is so incredibly boring. And if you watch the Tour de France, you understand. I mean, I watch it as well for our show. And I'm like, man, this is boring. Well, imagine being in there. But at the same time, the time counts. And you see this every year in the tour when somebody gets caught out in a crash or a mechanical issue. The time counts. And so you constantly have to think about that. Avoid crashes. Crosswinds. Crosswinds are one of the biggest factors when it comes to separating the field. So it's not like you can sit back and say, I'm going to wait for the time trials and I'm going to wait for the big mountains. No, you have, for 3 weeks, you have to be totally focused.
And I think you have this maniacal vision in achieving the win at the tour. And but how did you come into thinking in this way? And can you put us in your shoes? What's happening when you are winning it? Like, what are you thinking?
You know, I know. It's a good question. I'm not super proud of the answer. I didn't love winning as much as I hated the thought of losing. And but if I want to talk about for a second, what I truly loved, I loved the process. Like I loved sitting in the off season, mapping out the season, mapping out the training, saying this is the process that is going to get me to this place where I'm going to do everything I can to not lose. So, and after a couple of years, I expected to win. And I would have been devastated if I would have lost. And that's not a healthy way. If I look back on it now, every year in Paris, I was like, all right, well, time to get the fuck out of here. I mean, that's honestly, and that is not the way to think about it, kids. Like you should stop and if you think about the beauty of that event, and I misjudged and I didn't place the importance on certain things specific to that event and that country that I would do today. But to stand on the top step on the Champs-Élysées and hear your national anthem is not to be taken lightly. And you certainly shouldn't be standing there going, all right, let's get this over with. I'm ready to roll. Like, I want to go home and I want to go hang out with my friends and my family. And no, stop. Soak that up. I go to Paris all the time. So anytime I'm there, I'm like, wow, this is really special. And I'm 53 years old now, so I see that. Pretty amazing.
What I'm wondering, Lance, is, and you see in other sports as well, like to stay at the top, it's extremely difficult. Most people, if you get into tennis, most people win once, but then Djokovic or Nadal, it's a different ball game. And now the same here, like you didn't do it once, you did it 7 consecutive times. So what does it take to be so consistent?
Well, I mean, look, there's a lot of things. I mean, there obviously were a lot of things, but you have to have a lot of luck. I mean, you do have to be lucky to avoid crashes. You have to have an amazing team, and you just have to be prepared. I mean, 7 years is a long time, especially if you consider all of the months and months and months that lead up to that one event. So my motivation never dipped. And again, that motivation was really to not lose. But I never struggled. When it was time to go out and do a 5-hour day on the bike that I knew was going to be hard and I got up and it was raining, I just put my raincoat on, right? A lot of guys said, well, it's raining. Maybe I'll try to do it tomorrow. Like I never struggled for motivation.
And then, Lance, you are at the top of the world. And then you go very fast from hero to zero. You're banned for life from cycling. Now, at this point, like most of the athletes I see, they just give up. How did you come back?
Look, I mean, I think that's. I'm super passionate about. I'm very passionate about. well, back up. I'm proud of this part, that chapter of my life, because you're right. And it does. You don't have to. Many of my peers, if not all of my peers, were disgraced. Right. All of my chief rivals were completely disgraced, and it crushed them. And in fact, killed some of them. Right. I've lost 5 or 6 sort of chief rivals from that generation to drugs and alcohol and habits. So that's an option, right? You can go that route and say, well, this didn't work out. I've been canceled. Or you could say, all right, well, this sucks and this is gonna suck, but I'm gonna wait this out. I am not giving up. And that was always, my mother never gave up. I never gave up when the coach threw me in the lane with 6-year-olds. I didn't walk out and leave. I said, no, I'm gonna stick this out and see how long it takes me to get to the next lane. So it was the same mentality. I was like, okay, this is gonna be brutal, but I'm gonna wait this out. And I'm gonna focus on my health. I'm gonna focus on my family. And when it's time, I'm gonna start trying things. It's the same as all you founders, right? You all know this drill. Like if it doesn't work, try something else. Pivot. And I sort of equate it to running routes on the playground when you're a kid, or just sort of screaming for the ball. You could be playing soccer. You probably grew up playing soccer. Yeah. You scream, hey, pass to me, pass to me. Well, there's a lot of kids that never get passed to. And there are a lot of kids that always get passed to. The one who never gets passed to oftentimes gives up. But if you just keep screaming and trying, eventually they're going to pass to you. And the world passed to me. And so, but I don't want it to, I certainly don't want to make it sound easy. I mean, there were plenty of days where I thought, I just don't think this is going to work. I know I'm motivated, and I know I'm determined, and I know I'm not going to give up, but it might not work out. That is a possibility, but I didn't quit, and fortunately the world threw me the ball, passed me the ball, and I tried to make the most out of it. We also, too, I will say, we live in an amazing time in human history. I wouldn't be sitting here today if I was not, or if it wasn't possible for me to create content on my own. The only reason, Kyriakos, we even know each other, and you referenced it, is our podcast. You know, my show started about 7 years ago. This is a time when anybody could be a podcast. In fact, nothing's changed. Anybody can be a podcaster in the next hour. Go get the gear, upload it to Spotify, you're a podcaster. Had my life happened 10 or 20, 30 years earlier, that wouldn't have been possible. I wouldn't have been able to create content. I wouldn't have been able to build back an audience. I wouldn't have been able to monetize that. And therefore, I wouldn't have been able to go out and leverage this sort of reclaimed audience to raise a fund. And so I oftentimes sit around and question the living in the times that we live in today. Because it's easy to get stuck. Well, those are the good old days. I don't know about that. I mean, I actually think these are the good old days. Is there stuff we want to change? Of course. But my story wouldn't have been possible if I had not been able to create content, upload, and rebuild or reclaim that audience.
You mentioned about the fund a bit. You have one of the most top performing funds out there, and can you actually? We spoke about the Chris Sacca story once. Like you invested very early on in Uber. Can you tell us the story?
Well, yes, and he's the one who invested in Uber. I want to be very clear. But look, I think the Chris Sacca story and his fund was called Lowercase, which I was one of his first LPs in Lowercase 1, which is obviously what the big stake in Uber came out of. I met Chris Sacca at a bar of a restaurant in Aspen, Colorado, and we sort of struck up a relationship. And we kept in touch, and he called me and said, I'm going to raise a fund. And I didn't ask a lot of questions. I was betting on the man. And if it was Christine Sacca, I would have been betting on the woman. Point is, I'm betting on the person. And so I didn't even know Sacca had made the investment in Uber until, this was years later that he and I were talking, many years later. And at that point in my life, I had agents and business managers, and they paid attention to the quarterly updates, and they got on the webinars and all the stuff that we're so used to. But we were talking, and Uber had just raised a new round at what we thought was a crazy valuation at the time. I think $17 billion. And he starts telling me about the stake in Uber, and I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." I was like, "What was the valuation we got in at?" He said, $3.7 million. I said, "Whoa, all right." So, I gave him $100,000 for lowercase 1, which you guys can figure out that ended up being a lot, which is awesome. It's awesome. I'd love to get that call tomorrow. We'd all love that call. But the reality is, without that chance encounter at that restaurant bar in Aspen, without betting on the man, and as my life unfolded and the lawsuits piled up and endorsements completely evaporated, without that encounter at that place in Aspen, I don't know what I would have done for my family. So it's fun to think about. It's fun to sort of have fun with. It saved our family. And so then it's not, to me, that's I don't. Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, that's your track record, or this is who you know, what you've done. I don't look at it. I look at it as, holy shit. This kept food on my family's table during the most difficult time of our lives, when, we were lighting money on fire with everything, with the meltdown. So I really have there's obviously a soft spot in my heart for Chris Sacca. And same, not to the extent, but the same similar story with Docusign. Same thing.
That's a building right there, by the way.
Love it. I didn't know that. But same thing, betting on Brad Silverberg and Ignition. So that was also great. But the moral of the story is, and this is the way we invest with our fund too. We are one of your investors. Kyriakos, if you made me get up here and explain to everybody here exactly what Terra does, everybody would get up and leave. That's not my skill set. That's not, and I don't try. I don't aim for it to be or brag about it being. But if you want to ask me about Kyriakos, I can talk all day about that. So you bet on people. It's people first, and you bet on people that pick good people and surround themselves with good people. So it's been a good run. And yes, but also, it also holds true on the angel side. If I invest as I did in Athletic Brewing or Waterloo Water, these are all people bets. When I did the Athletic Brewing deal, it wasn't like I sat around and said, you know what I'd love is a non-alcoholic craft beer. I never said that. In fact, I wanted a real beer. But after having spent time with Bill, I said, this guy, there's something about this guy. He's going to figure this out. And so that, but again, I just told you, that's not my jam, but I'm betting on the person.
So in the podcast as well, you have two extremely successful podcasts. What does it take to make a good podcast?
Yeah, I just told anybody, so everybody's like, I'm going to start a podcast here in about an hour. I think, look, it depends on the topic. There are certain topics that get more attention. But just generally speaking, and I've heard this from a lot of people, and I've also found it to be true, consistency is the number one thing. If you say you're going to have a podcast and you say I'm going to do it every day, you tell the people I'm going to do it every day, and you do it for 22 days in a row, and then you take a 10-day break, and then you come back for 11 days, and that's trouble, right? It's better to say I'm going to do one a month, or I'm going to do a series. I'm going to find an interesting topic, and I'm going to do a 8-part series. So it's just some sort of a cadence or consistency that people come to expect. And then after that, I think you have to be interesting. I think you have to ask good questions or talk about things that people really want to hear about. I didn't start talking about cycling. In fact, I refused to talk about cycling when I did the original show. And then we also added the cycling show. So that the cycling show is popular enough, or the sport is popular enough, that people, they want to hear our opinion on it. And then the interview style show, again, has to be consistent.
Now, if you consider founders in general, what happens is that there's a lot of struggle, and I can draw many parallels between the Tour de France and the entrepreneurship. What would your advice be for the people here?
Well, I've never been a founder, so I may not be the best person to ask. Look, I'll go back to it. I think it's all about people. So whoever the founder is surrounding themselves on the team, on the actual team. I also think it's important who they surround themselves on the cap table, right? I mean, we love to sort of tout our hands-on approach with our founders, most of our founders. You just not, I mean, you understood what I meant. And so that too is important. But having said that, again, I've never...
I mean, I called you 2 weeks ago to do an event, and you flew here, so...
Yeah. There was some juggling going on. I do have this thing, and look, put your earmuffs on for a sec, Kyriakos. I will, if whatever Kyriakos needs or wants, I'll do it. I really will. And if I don't know or I can't, well, it's just the answer is I don't know or I'm sorry I can't. But I'm going to do everything I can. I was supposed to be in LA tomorrow. We got our big music festival in Austin. I was out late last night with our headliner was Chris Stapleton, and I said, "That's okay. I'll get up early. I'll be there." But you go long and you go deep on the ones that you have the most conviction with, and you fit in that bucket. And so. I love it.
I would never in my life expect that, man. It's crazy. Thank you.
Just keep building. We'll be fine.
So
and one day he explained to me, to the
what Terra does, right?
No.
So
I have a rough idea.
I asked you we did another podcast together, and I asked last time, and there was a pretty interesting answer, which was about cycling and what the future of cycling should be. And the way I understand it is more of a what's the future of the Tour de France? What do you think should change there? What do you think should be kept?
Look, I think cycling. I love sports. I love content. I have young kids, so I've got everywhere from 14 years old to 24. I know how they consume sports. I know how they consume content. Cycling is old school, right? And it has continued to stay old school. And I don't think that will change for quite some time, right? One family owns the most dominant event, and they're not letting go of that. I think cycling will be, until there's some fundamental shift in the way the sport is structured, how it's monetized, who has a stake in the upside, which right now is primarily that family, it's going to be tough. And layer in, I mean, if I asked my kids to sit down and watch a stage of the Tour de France, my younger kids, they would never do it. Never. And they would sit around and say, "Can you fast forward to where there's a crash or something?" They would say something like that. So I think as part of this reimagination, you have to figure out another way to bundle it up and present it to a younger generation. I think that holds true for a lot of sports. But look, there's so much activity in sports. I'm talking about investment, whether it's media rights, team ownership, league ownership. We've all witnessed it, and it's especially and finally happening in women's sports, which I think is amazing. You see what's happening with the WNBA, the Women's Soccer League as well. Like, tennis sort of led the way. The Williams sisters, especially, and women's sports is really catching up there. So there's a lot of money that wants to back these things, but here in our sport, you have, I can only imagine how many times that family has been called to sell the event, and they will not sell it. So it's theirs.
Super. Guys, let's do a Q&A. What questions do you have?
Lance, you mentioned betting on the man.
Where am I looking here? Oh, sorry. Yeah, right
Hey, how
there.
you
Right, the one right here in front?
Yeah. You mentioned betting on the man. What are some character traits that you index on most heavily that people might not expect, and things that are very positive or things that flag to you that there's a reason not to bet on somebody?
And this, I'm not a woo-woo person, like at all. But there is what and I'm just basing it on my own track record and our fund's track record. There is this spidey sense in talking to somebody. That's been made harder. I think it's been made harder by virtual meetings and stuff like that. But I think, I don't know. All of the winning bets I've ever made, I just sat with somebody and said, I'm gonna support this person. And it wasn't because they went to Harvard. It wasn't, I didn't necessarily call around and get 4 different references, although I do think that's really important. I think you start calling around. We do that a lot, obviously, with the fund. You start calling around and asking. I think that's incredibly powerful. But there's not, again, it sounds woo-woo, but there's just some feeling.
Being an endurance athlete, like, you do a lot of kilometers a week, a lot of, vertical meters a week. So you start to crave all these kilometers like all day. You want to be all day doing more and more and more. So nowadays, how do you train? Do you train? And how do you manage that craving for kilometers that I imagine nowadays you are doing 10% of that weekly mileage?
The most important thing is to don't think about distance. When you get older, distance doesn't matter anymore because you would be so demoralized trying to compare today's distances that I would do or to when I was in my peak. When I ride now, I don't even look at miles. I only look at vert. So when I go out and ride, if I can, Austin is not the best riding and I don't ride long, but if I can go out and cover 3,000 feet or 1,000 meters in an hour and a half, I say, that's enough. That's good for me. The other way to think about it is time, right? So I'm not going to train 6 hours a day, but I'm also fine to train 1 to 2 hours a day. As I've also, and I do ride, I ride a lot less than obviously I did before. As I've gotten older, I really subscribe to this notion that strength and resistance training is by far the best thing I can do at my age. I don't think Lance Armstrong training to do a marathon or a triathlon is going to help him when he's 80. I think Lance Armstrong spending time in the gym, spending time on his mobility, flexibility, and pure strength, I think is what ultimately, and I'm not alone here. I think this is kind of having a moment. And I think it's a moment to stay, but and it's the reason I started doing training more specifically for things like high rocks. Did the high rocks in New York. I just feel like that's going to be the most sustainable thing for me. I'm back in the pool, being back in Austin. I'm back swimming masters. So it's you just have to have a different lens, and it's not. When I think back to the amount of miles or kilometers that we put in, I don't think I could do 2 or 3 days without breaking down. So I spend most of my time in the gym now.
Is it on? Oh, yeah. Lance, thanks for coming in. That sounds like a wild plane ride. My mom was a postal worker, so I very much appreciated you riding USPS. And also, when I was 60, I read It's Not About the Bike. Great book. Totally changed my life. Got me into cycling.
Thank you.
It was incredible. Question for you. So you were mentioning, maybe when you're younger, you're in Paris, you just won the Tour, and then you just kind of want to get out of there. And kind of this feeling now where you're like, maybe I should have soaked it up a little bit. Do you think that if you had that attitude when you were younger, you would have still been performing at the same level that you were?
It's a great question. It's actually a very good question. Maybe not. Maybe not. And another way that I've thought about. So my son just finished a year. That's why I go to Paris a lot. My son just finished a year of culinary school in Paris. So I would go visit him, and I would bring my bike. And Paris is an amazing city. Well, it's an amazing city, but it's also an amazing city to ride. And they built so much infrastructure, and you can get around. You'd be surprised. And so he would be in school all day, so I would ride a lot. And then I would be in the middle of the city, so you're riding past all of these incredible monuments, museums, places. And I had this thought the last time I was there. I said, and I was thinking about the city, the country, and the race. And as a 53-year-old, I could only help but think about the Tour as it's their race. This is the country's race. This is it's also the family's race, but it's the country of France's race. When I raced, I thought it was my race. I was convinced the Tour de France was mine. And it's not. It's theirs. And that's a mistake, right? And now, to the point of your question, if I would have had the attitude like, hey guys, thank you for letting me show up to your race, would I have been the same competitor? Maybe not. But it took me 20 years to be riding around all alone in this beautiful city going, holy shit. I thought this was mine. This is not mine. This is theirs. And, but it's I love the question because I think you're right. But I also love learning later in life that I was wrong. And so, it's almost so corny that I'm riding around. When I ride, man, I think like crazy. And I'm like, I'm going to write an op-ed in Le Monde. You got to write it at both. You got to write it in Le Monde and Le Figaro, both the right and the left papers. And I'm going to tell them, guys, I fucked up. I thought this thing was mine. Turns out it's y'all's. I mean, they would laugh me out of the country if I wrote that. But it's the truth. And it was a big mistake also. So it's again, fun to be at my age and say, wow, yeah, this was theirs. They built it. They made it. That thing's going to go on with or without me, clearly. And my bad.
Given your start as a swimmer, how do you think about range and consistency in your athletic endeavors, and how do those map into entrepreneurship or other things that you want to do in life?
Range and consistency, meaning over the...
Like as far as you start out swimming, right?
Yep.
But you get into, say, triathlons, then you're known as a cyclist.
Yep.
But you're doing 3 different sports, different muscle groups, skills, etc. Eventually you focus on cycling.
Yep.
Are really successful in that. Like, if you just also were focusing on swimming and running for that whole time, presumably maybe you wouldn't have been as successful. Like, how much of your training for the Tour de France was also swimming and cycling, or swimming and running during that time?
Oh,
how do you think about
I think it all.
consistency?
I think it all adds up. Is that what you mean? Like,
I mean, it's like, how do you think about focus?
No, I mean, if most professional endurance athletes started at a very young age, certainly in cycling. There's only one on the stage today that started late in life, and that's Primož Roglič. But he's a freak. I mean, he was able to. I mean, he found the sport of cycling as rehabilitation from a ski jumping crash. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, he's not ski jumping anymore. But that's 1 in a million. So yes, those things certainly are beneficial over time. But with regards to, I think you also mentioned something about to what we do now, our approach to invest. I should also say, my favorite sport in the whole world, I've talked about all these endurance sports and sports that we would all consider sports, but my favorite sport to do in the world is golf. I love golf more than anything. And I love and this has to do with investing. First of all, the game of golf would be very easy if the fairways were concrete and the hole was as wide as a pickleball court. It'd be very easy. Anybody could play that game. But the course defends itself against the player. So that's why you have sand traps. That's why you have water. That's why the cup is 5 inches wide. That's why there's all of these things for the course to defend itself against us. But you also, with the game of golf is it's a math game, right? We know, right? Your total score, that's a number. The clubs are a different number. You choose a 5-iron versus a 7-iron because the math equation is totally different. In those decisions, there's also risk. What do I want to risk? Am I going to go over this water or am I going to go around? Am I going to lay up or am I going to go for it? So that's why I love the game. I love to play the game, but I also love to manage the risk of the game, which is what I think you have to do. Well, we all have to do, but certainly as investors, you have to manage risk and reward. But I'll stop talking about golf because you can tell I love it a lot.
Thanks, Lance. I think I was born with a Livestrong bracelet. I remember watching you in the 2010s when you returned. I was too young before that. As a cycling fan, it feels like there's hope right now for American cycling. I'm wondering if you think in the next 5 years there will be a general contender for top 1 or 2, or if Jonas and Pogačar sort of are just going to monopolize for the next few years.
Well, I don't know. But as a fan and as somebody who covers the sport on the show, look, I think Pogačar is incredible. And if he wins for the next 5-10 years, he deserves to win. So nobody can say anything. If you're the best, you're the best, and everybody else, too bad, so sad. It does get boring. I mean, they look at the season he just had. 24 wins, Triple Crown. I mean, I don't know who watched the World Championships in cycling. To attack alone 100 kilometers from the finish, unheard of. That has never happened in the sport of cycling. Truly one of the GOATs. Will we have an American come on? Of course we will, at some point. If I was the powers that be, we have enough Americans now to build an American super team, right? We have a lot of Americans, but they're sort of spread out over 6 to 10 teams. We now have this crop of young talent to build an American super team. And you sprinkle in some seasoned guys that don't necessarily have to be from America. Somewhere in and around that, is there a future winner? Look, it's hard to win the Tour. And they only have it once a year. So it's hard to say, but I feel more optimistic about this today than I would have 3 years ago, 6 years ago. And then the last thing I'll say is I don't know. Cycling has changed. And we see kids turning pro at 18, 19 years old. I turned pro at 21. People thought I was crazy. Right? That's why they have the under 23 division, because those are supposed to be the amateurs. I mean, Pogačar was winning the Tour de France as a U23 rider. So since he started so young, can he keep going? When I raced, people thought you had to be in your late 20s, early 30s to win the Tour. Is he going to be able to have a career that can go that long? Or is it going to get burned out? Last thing I'll say. My sort of teammate, which was always my teammate on the bike, but my teammate on our podcast, George Hincapie, has a son, Enzo Hincapie. His kid's 16 years old. He's an amazing talent. He won 82 national championships this year or something. I mean, that good. The level of specificity in and around his nutrition, he's 16. Nutrition, training, watts, recovery, everything is measured. That's great. I don't know if that's great I don't know if you can start doing that at 16 and continue to do that when you're 32. So that's that part of the story will begin to unfold.
Yeah, I'm over here on your right. Hey, Lance. I'm really fascinated by this discussion you actually started around your mindset and what got you going when you were at the peak of your performance. But you also reflected on those moments, the hatred of losing being a greater motivator than the love of winning, and how in your wiser years you've kind of reflected and been like, I might have missed on something there. I resonate deeply with that fuel driving towards greatness. And I'm curious if you found anything that feels like that gets your motor going in the same way, but isn't maybe driven by a hatred of failure or even kind of being written off. Because I think that was implicit in moving up the lanes is like, please count me out so I can go get that for
watch
the next
this.
one.
Yeah. No, the answer is no. Nothing has, but I know that that's okay. I believe that that's okay. I don't know that that's okay, but my belief is that that is okay. I'm a realist. I know that in my experiences as one of the most famous and influential athletes in the world weren't just on the bike. They were off the bike. And they were incredible experiences. I'll never have those ever again.
If you don't mind me asking, what's behind that belief for you? That it's better now, the way that you approach it?
Well, other than being realistic, I mean...
Yeah, fair.
This is a trap for so many athletes. And we see it. You don't need to... You could watch the documentaries. You could read the newspaper. You could read Twitter. I mean, it's a trap. And if you can't find some way to transition from your sport... Now, my transition was... I wouldn't say it wasn't forced upon me, but it was impressed upon me. And so I had to think on my feet. I don't know that many athletes can, but yet, if I heard one part of the question, I mean, is there, I mean, if Kyrgiakos sells Terra for $6 billion, is that going to feel the same as winning my 6th Tour de France, which broke the record that nobody had ever done? There were four or five guys that had won 5. So we had 2 6s. No. No offense, Kyrgiakos. I mean, for Kyrgiakos, it will. We'll all be doing this little get-together on his yacht in the Mediterranean off of Cyprus at some point. But no, it's just different. And that's okay. That is okay. Like, I'm fine with that. I look, to sum that part of it up, like people ask me all the time about little different things. Would you do it over? Everybody was taking drugs. If you had to do it all over, would you do it again? I said, listen, what are you talking about? Nobody gets do-overs. You don't. So just know that. So don't ask me that either. Like, I know I have to do with what I'm doing right now and manage the situation. And as I told Kyrgiakos the other day, by the way, the only thing I ever cared about, once this all melted down and I realized I was going to have to reimagine, recreate, and reassess, I only had one goal, and that was to support my family. The only thing I cared about. So if I can do that, I'm good. If I can't do that, I'm really not good. And so they're different, but it's good. You're gonna have me thinking about this for the rest of the day, but no, they're different.
Let's do the last question. I want to keep it at my yacht in Cyprus.
The last one's gonna be on the yacht. Everybody got the invitation to Kyrgiakos' yacht. Yeah.
Hello. Okay. I'm curious, you mentioned that when you were on the Tour de France, one of the things that you loved was the process, and that oftentimes the motivation was not so much winning as it was not losing. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit, as you've kind of transitioned into venture capital stuff, where oftentimes there can be a lot of losses that can be offset by one big win. how that shaped your thinking about process and yeah.
Well, my eyes are wide open when it comes to that. I would challenge, and we spent some time here talking about Chris Sacca and Uber, lowercase fund one. I would challenge anybody in this space to name one other company in lowercase one. I couldn't tell you, and I should know, but he had one. And so we have 20, like for example, we have 21 companies in Fund 1. We'll have 30-ish as part of Fund 2. I think there's a couple things to keep in mind is how we allocate our time is really important. I mean, you have to, when Kyriakos calls me, I always pick up. Now, without naming names, there's other people that call that, you don't always pick up. And that's also part of the process. But also just being realistic. I mean, the nature of this game is, at least the way my brain operates, is you start with a fund returner. So go find a fund returner. And then that would be your Grand Slam, but that's your Grand Slam. But let's return the fund. And then you start to find 2 to 5 other triples, right? I mean, for us, Aura is a fund returner. So after that, the LPs have been paid back, and now we're tracking the Kyriakoses of the world, the Vasus at Terra, at Vital Bio of the world, the Robins at Outside, et cetera. You start to go down the list, and then you're in the money. Then that's gravy. And so, but that's all the process too. The other thing that's very different from what you asked me about and what I talked about, when I talked about process for winning a Tour de France, that's a 6-month process. We would all love, who wouldn't, sign me the hell up for a 6-month process again. No, this is a 10-year process. So it's very different. But that just means too, you have to, at least the way I view it, you just have to be more patient, more disciplined, and just let this process play out. There's not, my life and its relationship with 6-month processes is over. So it's a longer game. I mean, we've been at this jam for 3 or 4 years. So that's already much longer than 6 months. But with that, it just requires patience.
You said something that struck me, which is I never struggle for motivation. What made you this way? Is this something in your childhood? And what is the mindset that you have when you're like, I'm very low, I need to go back up? What's your, mind model that you follow?
Look, I don't know. I mean, I think we learn a lot from our parents. I think we also just get a lot from our parents. I told you all earlier, my mom was 17 when she had me. That means she was 16 when she got the words, hey, you're pregnant. Which were immediately followed up by the words of, you're not going to have that baby, right? I mean, you're in Dallas, Texas. You're not going to stay with this guy. You're 16. And my mom never wavered. She said, oh, no, I'm having this baby. So I'm already absorbing that as somebody who's in the womb. By the way, we absorb a lot in the womb. We also absorb trauma in the womb. And so all of this I was absorbing as a little tadpole. And I do think that's a big part of it. My mom, and she wasn't, when I came out and grew up, I mean, it's not like she stood around and said, hey, you have to be motivated. She never did that. She was just like, I was like, thanks, Mom. I was blessed to have that. And to the other part of your question, what do I do when, the other thing I've been blessed with is there's not a lot of days where I suffer from a dip or a lack of motivation. There are times of the day that I know that I'm better and I know I'm more motivated, whether that's a workout or a Zoom call, it doesn't matter. I know, you want to get the best Lance, you do it. I'm a morning person. You catch it in the morning. If it's later in the day, same with the workout. If I get past noon and I haven't worked out, I probably just won't because I know that's not my time. So, but I know those things. And sort of stick to my rules. But yeah, so far so good.
Super. I was walking the other day, I was thinking that you might not know basketball, but you have heard of Michael Jordan. You might not know tennis, you have heard of Federer. And you might know nothing about cycling, but you know Lance. Thanks for flying today.
Thanks, guys. Kyriakos, thank you. Thanks, everybody.